All right, let's get right into it. We hear all the time that high blood pressure is, well, bad for you. But how bad are we talking? Today, we are going to unpack the hard science connecting this really common condition to one of the biggest health problems on the planet, heart failure. And we're going to start with the numbers.
So, let's start with just one number, 64.3 million. Just take a second to let that number sink in. It's a huge figure, and it represents a massive global health crisis. So what is it?
That's the number of people right now living with heart failure across the globe. It's an absolutely staggering figure, and it really shows you the scale of what we're dealing with.
And if you bring it a little closer to home, here in the US, the stakes are just incredibly high. Heart failure is a factor in 1 out of every 9 deaths. This is not some minor issue, it's a major killer. Which leads to the big question, what's driving this? That brings us to our first section, the high-pressure suspect. We're going to investigate how a simple measurement can lead to such a catastrophic problem, and we're going to look at our main culprit, hypertension. So what are we actually talking about when we say high blood pressure? Well, the clinical term is hypertension, and it basically means your blood pressure is consistently reading it at or above 130 for the top number, that's your systolic pressure, or 80 for the bottom number, the diastolic. It's a simple measurement, sure, but it has some pretty profound consequences. Okay, so we've all been told there's a connection, right? But you gotta ask, how strong is that link really? Is the evidence solid? Does it hold up across a whole bunch of different studies and people? Well, that is the central mystery we are solving today.
Which brings us to Section 2, a study of studies. See, to get a truly definitive answer, we're not just looking at one piece of research. We're going to the very top, the ultimate form of evidence, a massive, systematic review and meta-analysis.
I love this analogy. A meta-analysis is kind of like the Supreme Court of science. It doesn't just look at one trial, no, it gathers up all the best individual studies on a topic, combines all their data, and then issues a final, powerful ruling. It gives us a conclusion that's way more reliable than any single study ever could. And the scale of this particular review is just mind-blowing.
First up, the researchers didn't just look at a couple of studies. They pulled together the data from 47 high-quality, independent studies. And get this, the number of people involved in those studies? More than 20 million participants. I mean, the sheer volume of data we are talking about here is just incredible.
And within that massive group, the researchers were able to analyze over 170,000 individual cases of heart failure. The scale is just breathtaking, and that's exactly what gives these findings so much weight.
So now for Section 3, the overwhelming evidence. After sifting through all of that data, what did the Supreme Court of Science have to say? What was the final verdict?
The whole thing really came down to one single crucial number, 1.71. Now that number represents the overall relative risk. So what on earth does that actually mean for you?
It means this. If you have high blood pressure, your risk of developing heart failure is a whopping 71% higher than someone with normal blood pressure. Let me say that again, 71% higher. This isn't some tiny statistical blip. It's a massive, life-altering increase in risk. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. Look at the bar on the left. That's your baseline risk with normal blood pressure. Now look at the bar on the right. That massive jump. That's the impact of hypertension. You don't need to be a data scientist to see just how dramatic that difference is.
But wait, because the story gets even more interesting. The analysis found that this risk isn't the same for everybody. When they drilled down into the data from one of the major included studies, they found the risk linked to hypertension varied a lot by ethnicity. As you can see, the data showed a dramatically higher relative risk for Asian and Hispanic participants. This is such a critical finding because it tells us that a one-size-fits-all approach to prevention just isn't going to cut it.
Okay, so that brings us to Section 4, how pressure breaks the heart. We've seen the what, the data is just undeniable, but now let's explore the how. What's actually happening inside the body that connects high pressure in our arteries to a failing heart? What's the motive?
Let's walk through this chain reaction. So first, your heart is a pump, right? With hypertension, it's forced to pump against constant high resistance day in and day out. Just like any muscle you'd work out at the gym, the heart muscle adapts to the strain by getting bigger and thicker. Doctors call this left ventricular hypertrophy. But here's the problem. Bigger is not better.
These thicker walls get stiff and they become way less efficient at pumping blood. Over time, that overworked, stiffened muscle just can't keep up anymore. It starts to fail or decompensate, and it can't get blood effectively to the rest of the body. And that is heart failure.
So that brings us to our final section, your takeaway on risk. We've looked at the stats, we've looked at the biology, but let's zoom out. What does all of this science actually mean for you in your life? Here's the most important point, the big takeaway. The evidence is so strong, so consistent, that scientists can now say with confidence, high blood pressure isn't just correlated with heart failure. It is a direct cause of heart failure. It's a key driver of the disease, which makes getting it under control absolutely critical. Now, the good news here is that a lot of the things that lead to high blood pressure are things we can actually do something about. The research points to these key factors, right? A high BMI, not getting enough physical activity, smoking, and of course, diet. Things like too much salt or not enough fruits and vegetables. These are all things we can target to lower our risk.
So, we'll leave you with this thought. The science is crystal clear. The link is causal. The stakes are incredibly high. And the very first step in taking control of your risk is simply knowing your numbers. So the question is, what's one simple thing you can do, maybe even this week, to find out what your blood pressure is? Because knowing that number, that's where the path to prevention begins.